Great. Okay. Thank you. All right. Good morning to everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to participate in this whole seminar and greatly appreciate the interest that people have in destroying a well in Fresno County. It's a very important subject that most people aren't aware of. And I really appreciate being able to speak with you. And right from the beginning, just to let you know that if you have any questions or concerns or anything, my contact information is on the slides, and I'll go over that at the very end. And please feel free to reach out to us because that is something we like to do, to educate the public or help out with any situations that might be there. So again, my name is Tom Fuller. I work with the Environmental Health Division of the Fresno County Department of Public Health. And before we get into, really get into what we talk about with well destructions, I want to take advantage of a couple of minutes of your time just to kind of go over a little bit of what the Environmental Health Division of the Health Department does. It's a division that a lot of people never interact with, but it is a very important part of what the Health Department does in Fresno County. Our mandate, very broad, our mandate is to protect the health of the citizens of Fresno County. And basically that comes down to making sure that what you eat and what you breathe and what you touch and what you drink doesn't hurt you. That's just a simple way to do it. We have a lot of different programs. This is a list of the different programs that we cover. So it is really extensive. Consumer food, you know, we're the ones that are out there doing the inspections of restaurants. By the way, a little bit of education to the public. All of our restaurant inspections are available for public viewing. So you can just get on, you just Google Fresno County Health Inspection Reports, and you'll be able to look at all the inspection reports to your favorite restaurants. Spoiler alert, it might ruin your day out, but it is available to everyone. We also do vector control. These are things that could cause disease or carry disease around. We have a large program that deals with hazardous materials. Anytime hazardous materials are produced or used or spilled or generated in the county, we need to make sure that it's taken care of properly. We have land use. So when there's a large project that's going to be put into use or started up in the county, it goes through our land use to make sure that you know, we can mitigate any effect to the health of the citizens of the county at the same time. We have milk inspectors that go out every morning. They're going out to all the different dairies and testing the milk quality and making sure the milk is up to standard before it even gets sent to the bottling centers or the processing centers. We have solid and liquid waste people that are specialized in making sure that any waste, whether it's the, you know, the septic pumper trucks or whether it's the garbage trucks or whatever, any waste in the county is dealt with properly and in a healthy way. Institutional health, we inspect jails and things like that where people are for some reason held in detention. We make sure that those are healthy and up to standards. We have something called the organized camp group as well. Up in the mountains especially, we have a lot of places where they organize camps where people can send their kids for a week or two at a time. And we go through those and you know, inspect them and make sure that they are up to standards and that the people that are attending those camps are receiving the care they need and you know, have a healthy and safe environment up there. We have a body art program where any place where you can get tattoos or permanent makeup or things, you know, piercings or things like that, we inspect those to make sure that those are safe and done properly. We have an emergency response team. When an emergency happens out in the county where any kind of hazardous material has been spilled or humans are possibly being subjected to hazardous materials, we have a 24-hour group that goes out to find out what's going on and to make sure things are taken care of and identified and cleaned up properly. We also take care of recreational health. And recreational health, we deal with swimming pools and health spas. Any place where there is a pool that the public can get into, we inspect those to make sure that they are safe and sanitary. We also take care of substandard housing in the county. So let's say if someone is renting a house from someone else and the owner is not providing for them hot water or the proper maintenance for a house, and it's an unsafe living condition, then we intervene and help take care of that situation. Animal control, anything out in the county where there's situations with animals, rabies. This morning, for instance, I was just on the phone with someone who got bit by a dog. And so we're going to trace that down and see what needs to happen. We also have lead hazard control. A lot of the older houses still have paint on them with a little bit of lead in it, and that can completely ruin the life of a child. It can completely shut down their nervous system and other parts of their body. So we do have a system that goes out and does inspections and helps remediate that situation. But water surveillance, that's what we're talking about today. We have a water surveillance program. With the water surveillance program, we're concerned with permitting wells, all kinds of wells. You know, the most common is the domestic well, and for a house, there's ag wells, the large irrigation wells, industrial wells, and companies, or you know, big plants that are producing things. We have a specialized wells like cathodic protection wells. We have monitoring wells. Just yesterday, day before yesterday, I was out inspecting some monitoring wells that were being put in to keep an eye on the quality of water, soil boring, and also the well destructions that we're going to talk about today. Another part of our job with the water surveillance program is that we take care of what are called state small water systems. So these are small systems of where water is provided to a limited number of people. You know, maybe like it's a campground, or maybe it's a mobile home place that has their own water source. And our job is to inspect those systems, make sure that they are providing clean water, and we do periodic testing of water quality and make sure that the water that they receive is potable. So that's kind of what a quick little look at what we do with environmental health and the water surveillance program. But we're going to go ahead and move along to what we are here for, and to talk about well destructions. Well destruction, you know, in the news always you're hearing about new wells being drilled and well constructions, but a very important part of taking care of the environment is the well destructions. So we're going to talk about that. What is a well destruction? A bit of a definition there. Simple. It's the process used to permanently close a well. It's no longer going to be used. You can't just like bury it or ignore it. It needs to be permanently closed, okay, so it can no longer be used. Some of the common reasons that we come across for people needing to destroy a well, wells failed to provide safe and healthy water. Okay, this can happen, for instance, in certain areas where a water test is done and there are certain chemicals that really can't be safely removed from the water. For instance, there are certain wells that are showing up with a positive for dibromochloropropane, DBCP, which is very dangerous to human health. And you can't even use that water to shower. You just shouldn't have that water in your home at all. So a well that shows up with that well needs to be destroyed, because that water is literally poison. Sometimes wells are destroyed because the well doesn't produce enough, or it goes dry, and we're seeing a lot of that. You know, as our aquifer is kind of drying up and the water levels are going lower, a lot of the wells, especially domestic wells, are going dry. So a well doesn't produce enough, it goes dry, it's not needed anymore. That well does need to be destroyed properly. The well's no longer needed. You know, maybe it's still producing, but they have a better producing well, or maybe they've decided that they just don't need to use much water. They need to destroy it properly. Sometimes the property where the well is found is being repurposed. That happens, for instance, a place where a house used to be is now going to be used as a place to park semi-trucks, something like that. So then they need to destroy the well. A lot of wells had to get destroyed when the high-speed rail came through. So, you know, the property is being repurposed, the well is no longer needed, does need to be destroyed properly. Also, as certain municipalities start to grow, they can provide water to people, and so the people no longer need to have a well to do that. This is what the California State Water Well Standard says to us about wells that need to be destroyed. A well that is no longer useful must be destroyed. So it is a mandate that comes from the state, and it covers all wells. Any any perforation into the ground that goes deep enough really needs to be destroyed properly when it's no longer useful. Okay, so, residential, agriculture, the industrial wells, even the exploratory and test wells or soil borings. I was on a place the other day where they were doing a series of soil borings. They're going to do 13 different soil borings. And you can see in this picture down here where this fellow he's doing a boring into the soil, and they go down and take a sample to try to find out what possible contamination could be there, or to find out the soil structure. Well, when they do that hole, we require them to destroy it properly, and we're going to go over the reasons why. But any well that is no longer useful needs to be and must be destroyed. So that's part of our education efforts, is to help people understand that it's not an option. It's not this is a nice thing to do, please destroy the well, or it doesn't look nice, we need to get rid of it. No, it's a requirement of the state. Then a well that is no longer useful really does need to be destroyed. I'm going to go over really quick a couple of different benefits to properly destroying a well. The big one here is safety for people. Okay, so each of these wells that I have a picture of there, these are wells that people fell down. All right, this first one right here, this was 50-foot deep well, and a 35-year-old woman fell down it. She survived. They were able to get her out. Over here, we have a gentleman with a very small well, 60-foot deep, and a 7-year-old boy fell down that. And after a lot of work and many hours underneath, he was able to be saved. Over here, we have a well that, people didn't even know about. The 6-year-old was out wandering through the yard and ended up falling down this 35-foot well. He also survived. What I'm not including in here is the people that did not survive, because there are quite a number as well of people that have fallen down, especially children that are out wandering, and they come across an open well, they fall down, and they're not able to be rescued. And for landowners and farmers especially, this word down here, very important, liability. Because in these cases, when there's an open well that hasn't properly been destroyed, and the state has said an unused well needs to be properly destroyed, if they don't do it and someone falls down there, then that landowner is liable. So very important that people understand, if there is an open well on their property, they need to take care of that, because it is very dangerous. A couple of years ago, when I was going out to do some inspections, I drove across some property and saw what looked like a wellhead. I went up to see it, and it was very much similar to what I'm looking at here. Probably 200 feet away was a house that had 3 toddlers wandering around the yard. Super dangerous, super dangerous. So first of all, one of the main benefits of properly destroying a well is safety. Another huge thing is the protection of your water supply. The way I think about wells is kind of like the earth is kind of like our skin. When our skin is broken, so we have an injury or something, the skin is up to that point is protecting us really good from all the bacteria. But as soon as the skin's broken, that bacteria pours into our body and we get infections, unless we clean it out properly and seal up the skin. Well, it's the same thing with the well. The surface of the earth is like a skin. And when perforation is made in the well, or in the skin, I should say, like drilling a well or digging or whatever, then contaminants that are on the surface can easily get down into the water. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the idea of an aquifer, and how underneath this there are different collections of water and lakes and rivers and puddles and streams all deep underground. Well, this aquifer is shared by everyone in the neighborhood. And if someone has a well that is not being used, that is allowing contamination to enter into it, that contamination is going to go down to the aquifer. And the aquifer isn't just sitting there. In most cases, the aquifer is moving. In some places, the movement is very slow, years and years, slow migration of water. In other places, it's very fast. So any contamination that goes down into the aquifer is going to get shared around to the whole neighborhood. Now we see this little cabin up here. What if he had a well that wasn't properly destroyed, that was open over here near where he had some livestock, and the livestock excrement started to stream into that well would take it right down into the aquifer. And then over here, where maybe he's drinking water, he's pulling out his drinking water, he's going to pull that contaminated water right up here and start drinking it. Same thing with an agricultural well. If there is a well near here that has not been properly abandoned, and the farmer goes out and uses some chemicals on this crop, those chemicals, could possibly, very possibly, and probably drain right into that well, go down into the aquifer, and now anyone who drinks that water is sucking up that contamination. So properly destroying a well is the way that we protect our water supply. In the Water Surveillance Division of the county, our job is to protect the aquifer, to keep it healthy, to keep that water healthy and safe and clean. And that's why we have our programs of trying to make sure that people destroy a well properly, because we are trying to protect everyone in Fresno County from contamination to their aquifer. So those are the benefits of properly destroying a well: safety and also protecting your water supply. Here's a picture. This was a drawn up thing that was taken from Florida. And it was talking about the different contamination sources for the water supply, especially in these big cities. That's just an illustration. You can see anytime there's a perforation of the earth, that means that you are allowing, anything that's on the surface can easily go down those holes. And when they go down those holes, they can contaminate everyone's water. So someone over here has a well that hasn't been properly destroyed. It's a big open hole, and some nasty stuff gets down into that. Well, guess what? People around that are sucking the water out of a common source are going to start getting that nasty stuff. And so it's important, very important for us to understand that we need to protect the water supply by making sure that any wells that are out there that are not in use are destroyed properly to prevent anything from the surface getting down into the water supply. Another good reason to properly destroy a well is that it's the law. Okay, here's a copy of the page of the rules that are put out by the California Department of Water Resources. These are the standards of this, state of California, and very clearly it says down there, section 20, a well that is no longer useful, including exploration and test holes, must be destroyed in order to, 1, assure the groundwater supply is protected and preserved for further use, and 2, eliminate the potential physical hazard. Okay, so 3 great things that we need to keep in mind: safety, protecting your water supply, and also the law to destroy properly a water well. So I'm going to go really quickly. What are the requirements to properly destroy a well? Okay, there are some things you need to understand as far as properly destroying a well. An individual out there that just finds a well and wants to fill it in, it can't be done that way. It needs to be using, the person needs to be using a licensed contractor. And there's a very specific license called the C57 Well Drilling Contractor's License. So, it's, people will, present themselves saying that, yeah, I can destroy wells, not a problem. You need to make sure that that individual has the proper licensing. Okay, because these people are trained and highly experienced individuals on how to drill wells and how to destroy wells properly. They know the standards, they have the right equipment, and they can and will do it properly. That contractor then needs to get a well destruction permit from the county. Okay, this is part of something really important that we do, is the permitting process. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But it is very important that a well contractor, before the driller, the well driller, the well contractor does a well destruction, or even, well construction for that matter, before that happens, contractor needs to get a permit from us. Please understand, this is part of our in our effort to protect the water, right? Because we need to make sure that things are done properly. A well can be destroyed in a very improper way that sets up all kinds of problems in the future to our water supply. We need to make sure that it's destroyed properly. Who applies for the permit? The contractor is the one that applies for that permit. This is an example of a permit that we have here. Okay, you need to get a permit from environmental health. Who applies for the permit? The contractor does. What does a destruction permit cost? Okay, a permit to destroy a well at this time costs $518. So you find a C57 contractor, And the contractor is the one that will talk with you and then figure out exactly the plan, come up with a plan, and then that contractor files with us his plan. We do the research, and then the permit is given to the contractor, and the contractor will do the destruction. Before a well can be properly destroyed, we have to remove from that well anything that could obstruct it, anything that could cause problems. So, maybe it's an old well and it's got some old plumbing going down into it. Quite often, these smaller wells will have a submerged pump in it. All of that plumbing and pipes, the pump, the wiring, all of that has to be removed from the well. Something else that happens, especially in these large ag wells, especially the older style ones where they had a motor or engine on top, they would have some lubricants up here that automatically feed the motor or engine. And more often than not, as it gets used, the seals get worn, and some of that lubricant will go down into the well. So in some of these old ag wells, you can find 4, 5, 6 feet of oil sitting on top of the water. Well, that oil is a hazardous material. And so that has to be removed as well before the well can be properly destroyed. So that's part of what the contractor needs to do. The contractor will come in and prepare the well site for destruction. And part of that is removing anything out of that well, anything out of that hole that could possibly cause a problem during the destruction of the well. After that destruction, after that stuff has been removed, then the contractor will need to excavate, will need to dig out around the old well casing. When possible, and later I'll explain why sometimes it's not possible, we ask them, they need to excavate around the casing of the well to be abandoned and cut it off about 6 feet, doesn't have to be exact, but about 6 feet below the surface. It needs to be cut off, the casing needs to be cut off. Okay, so this is applicable in an area where you can dig out around there. Now, and sometimes you can't do that without damaging structure. So for instance, sometimes there are wells that are part of it's on a cement pad where there's other things that are sitting on that pad. And you can't tear apart the whole cement pad is to destroy the well. In those cases, then you can destroy the well right to ground surface. The preference is that you cut it off underground, especially in agriculture areas, because in the future, who knows, maybe someday someone's going to be plowing or disking or deep ripping in an area, and you want to make sure that a destroyed well is down deep and isn't going to affect whatever you're doing on the surface. So it's much better to be able to excavate around the casing, cut it down 6 feet below ground, and do the destruction there. Once that's cut down like that, then that well needs to be filled up with non-organic material. Okay, so that means you can't have anything that includes roots and leaves and garbage and stuff like that. It's got to be sand or dirt or clay. Okay, so it's got to be clean material without any organic stuff in it. You can fill up the well up to a minimum of 20 feet below ground surface. Okay, so from here where the ground surface is down, you've got to leave the top 20 feet, at least 20 feet empty. Okay, you don't fill it up, just the bottom part you fill up, and then from 20 feet below surface up to the surface, you leave that empty. The deeper, the better. Okay, our standards say that you got to have a 20-foot seal, but the deeper you can go, the better. And in some places, for instance, some municipalities, they won't allow you to fill up with anything. You have to completely abandon the whole well. Okay. Something to note here, wells that penetrate multiple aquifers are going to require some special destruction technique. This is especially important in the very deep wells on the west side. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the geology on the west side, but there's certain layers of something called Corcoran clay. And this Corcoran clay keeps water above it, kind of isolated. And then there's a whole nother aquifer below the Corcoran clay. If the well that you have and that you want to destroy actually perforates that Corcoran clay level, now you're having an issue where you could possibly have some bad water from one aquifer mixed with the good water from another aquifer and ruin the good aquifer. So there's some special destruction techniques or requirements that are required when you're destroying a well that penetrates more than one aquifer. And so that's part of the permitting process. When we get a permit application in from an individual that's going to do, one of the contractors, we go through it carefully to see, is this a Corcoran clay lever? Is this a place where the wells are penetrating more than one aquifer? Is there anything about this that needs some special attention to protect the water underground? But if it's just a regular well, like 99% of the wells that are destroyed these days, then you can go ahead and backfill it up, leaving the top 20 feet or more, the more the better, like I said, empty. Once you've done that, then you install what is called the seal of the well. This is like a plug. This is a plug of impermeable material that fills in the top 20 feet of that well, or more than 20 feet of the well. So this is material that is not going to allow anything from the surface to penetrate through it. Okay, so there's two different materials that can be used to properly destroy a well. Has to be one or the other. First one is bentonite clay chips. So you can see this gentleman on the top picture over here. He has something called hole plug. That's the brand name. But what he's pouring in there is a special kind of clay. It's mined mostly in Wyoming. And this clay is called bentonite clay. And this clay has the property of, when it gets hydrated, so when it gets filled with water, it turns into kind of a thick paste, almost like toothpaste, and it expands, just swells up. So if you're pouring this stuff in here and you're getting it wet, and it swells up and then dries as a really thick plug. Very appropriate, very strong seal. Here in Fresno County, we require that the bentonite is applied in chip form. In other places, you can use a liquid slurry of bentonite, but the science has shown that those liquid slurry seals have a tendency to dry out and crack in an area that's prone to drought. And that's us, we're prone to drought. So we don't allow sealing with a bentonite slurry. You have to use the chips. So it's a very simple and fast way to do it. You just pour those chips down there. One of the requirements, though, is that if bentonite chips are used, the hole can have no water in it. All right, because those bentonite chips, if they hit water, they're immediately going to swell up, and they're not going to float down to the bottom and seal up from the bottom. So if a contractor wants to do a seal with clay chips, we need to make sure that the water is out of the hole. And that's another part of the permitting and inspection process. The inspector needs to go out there and observe and make sure. For the inspector's job, he'll go out there and look, or she will go out there and look and see, is there water in the hole? If there's water in the hole, you cannot use the bentonite chips because it won't seal it properly. Okay. Another option is to use cement or concrete over here. Okay, so cement or concrete can be poured down a well, that will do the job as well with cement or concrete. Real quick little aside here about the inspection process, now that I mentioned it. To assure that the well is destroyed in a way that protects the aquifer, and an inspector from the environmental health, we have to be out there. We have to be on hand when the seal is placed. So it's not a matter of going in after it's been placed and to look at it and say, yeah, it's been placed. We actually need to witness the seal being placed. Okay, that's the way that we make sure that it's sealed deep enough and it's sealed in a proper way that's really going to protect the aquifer. Because we don't know if we come across a place that's already been sealed, we have no idea how deep it is. We don't know how deep down the material has been put, and we don't know if it's been done properly. So a contractor needs to set up an appointment with us to have an inspector come out. So contractors need to plan things out, and they'll know a couple of days beforehand where they're going to be and when they're going to be ready. So they call us up and say, hey, I want to do a seal of my well on Thursday at 3 p.m. and 99% of the time we're going to say, sounds good, we'll be there. If all the inspectors are busy at the time, we'll say, hey, could you do it an hour earlier, an hour later? But we'll have someone out there to observe and see that the well seal has been put in properly. So the inspector goes out there, going to verify the depth of the seal. They're going to verify that the material is correct, so that the seal can be installed. Once the inspector has done that, then the contractor can go ahead and install the seal. Now, So there were two options for materials that you can use to destroy a well. There's also a method, different methods you can use to destroy a well. The first option is called the free fall option. And that's what we're seeing in the picture there. That is where the sealing material, whether it's cement, whether it's concrete, or whether it's the bentonite chips, are just tossed down the well. They're just poured right down the well. This is something that can be done if two conditions are met. One is that the hole has to be less than 30 feet deep. So if you're doing a seal that's a 100-foot seal, then you can't do a free fall, okay? But if it's 30 or less, then you can free fall your material into the well. Another requisite or a requirement is that there's no water in the well. So whether it's bentonite chips or whether it's cement, if it is being applied in a free fall method, then the well cannot have standing water in it. What'll happen is that the chips themselves will bridge, they'll clog up, they'll become hydrated and swell before they actually seal all the way to the bottom if they're exposed to water. And then concrete, especially a concrete mix, as it is settling through standing water, the cement itself separates out, and the heavy gravel, concrete, or sand or whatever, will be floating down or settling down to the bottom, while the cement settles out on the top part, and you don't have a good seal. So again, a free fall option is permitted when the hole is less than 30 feet deep and there is no water in the hole. So what will happen, a contractor will be out there, and we arrive on scene, and the inspector will take a look, and the inspector will say, hey, there's still a good 10 feet of water. He pulls out his measuring tape. There's still 10 feet of water. The contractor then will pump out that water before he's allowed to free fall. However, there is another option. If they decide that they want to seal a well that has water in it still, or a hole that still has water in it, then they can pump in the cement. This is not an option to use bentonite. They'll need to pump in the cement or the concrete. So what they do is they set up a cement pumper, this hose right here, high pressure, goes down into the well, and the cement will be pumped under pressure down into that well. And what's happening there is that pipe that goes into the well goes right to the bottom. And so the cement is delivered right to the bottom of the well, and the material is filled in there from the bottom upwards. And as it comes upward, it's pushing out all the water or debris or whatever is in there, and it's filling it up right from the bottom. So the two options, there's two materials. You can use bentonite or you can use the concrete cement mix. There's two options for installing it, either free falling it or pumping it. Okay, so those are the options on how to install a proper well seal when you're destroying a well. That material that you pour in there needs to be brought up right to the very top and form a mushroom cap on top of the old casing. So here's an example. Here's a well that was filled up right to the very top, and then the top needs to be almost a foot deep. It should be a foot deep, kind of like a mushroom cap going over it. So that makes sure that all edges, all around it, is completely sealed. Again, the sealing material has to fill right to the top and actually up over the top and forming a mushroom cap on the top of it. If bentonite clay chips are used, then before anything else happens, they need to be hydrated. Okay, so you need to pour water down into there. And it's not just like, pour a little bit of water in there. The bentonite has to be thoroughly hydrated. So you just keep pouring water, keep pouring water, keep pouring water until it's completely saturated. So here's something that happened on Tuesday. Okay, so these individuals were out there and they were putting some holes in the ground and then destroying them right away. And they were using the bentonite chips, and here they are hydrating the bentonite chips. Okay, so they poured and poured and poured. I was out there watching them, making sure that the bentonite was completely hydrated right to the very end, because that's going to swell up. Once that process is done and the material that's been used to seal the well is dried, then you need to refill the excavation and return the site to its original condition. Okay, so you see this picture here. Can you see where the well used to be? The answer is no, you can't. There used to be a well right here between the rows. It was properly destroyed and the site was returned to its original condition. So no one knows that there's an old destroyed well underneath here, and it's deep enough it's not going to disturb the next person who wants to disc over it. Okay, so that's the proper process to destroy a well. It's not a difficult thing, but it does need to be done according to standard, because again, remember, our focus here is safety and protecting the water supply underneath. Big question that comes out quite often: what if I want to keep an unused well for possible use in the future? Okay, so this could be, for instance, you still got some well and there's hope that the aquifer is going to return. We're starting to hear that a lot now. People are saying, look, all this water, I know the level's going to come back up. Well, honestly, the level might come back up over the next 100 years or so, but it's not going to be coming up very soon. But that you have the right to keep an unused well for possible use in the future. Some of the wells that are not going to be used can be used and are being used, for instance, as monitoring the well, where they're keeping an eye on what the water is like down there. If there's still some water in the well, they want to get samples once a year to see if there's any contamination, or they're checking to see what the levels are. So it is possible to keep it for some future use, but these are the requirements to maintain an unused well. You can't just have it sitting out there, a hole in the ground. First off, the well cannot have any defects that could affect the water quality in the well or the aquifer that it penetrates. So what we're talking about here is where the top of the well comes out of the ground, it needs to be protected. It can't be like having, cracked cement around it, or where the casing is cracked, or where there's a possibility of any contamination going into it. The well has to be well maintained, the wellhead there, to protect it. The well must be covered with a locked, watertight cap or some other means of securement. I don't know how many times I've come across wells that are not in use and someone's just like put a rock over the top. That doesn't work. Okay, someone can lift that rock off. Liquids and any kind of contamination go right down there. It needs to have a cap that's on there with a lock, or some other way that it's secured. So some people will put like a big metal cap on it and screw it or bolt it onto the casing. So you can't take it off unless you have a tool. That's how it needs to be covered, just to make sure that, some little kid that's curious, that sees something, isn't going to try and pry it off and throw stones down there. Horror story that we did have to experience here in the county once is there was a certain property in the county that had been abandoned by the landowner, and that landowner had left 2 open wells on the land, unbeknownst to anybody. Well, a group of people that were housing challenged at the time moved onto the property, and they found those wells, and they decided they would use them as bathrooms. So one of the wells became the ladies' bathroom, the other well became the men's bathroom. So literally, they were defecating down into the well. Now, that was a neighborhood where a lot of people not too far away from them were relying on well water. So all that defecation into the well contaminated everyone in the neighborhood water source. That's a great example of why, if you have an unused well, you've got to cap it off properly. The third thing is the well must be marked so it can be clearly seen. It's not going to be like hidden away underneath the trees or the bushes or whatever. It's got to be very clearly seen so people know what it is and they can see it. Area surrounding the well has to be kept clear of brush or debris. Okay, so trees or whatever near a well can put out their roots and start affecting the integrity of the well around that. It needs to be cleared around it. And then very important, the last one there, an abandoned well. So a well that's not in use shall not be used for disposal of any liquid or solid waste. Totally makes sense, but I'll tell you what, people do that. Okay, the people throw old oil down a well, throw garbage down the well. Whatever they need to get rid of, they know what to do with it, throw it down a well. Okay, so it's very important. You can keep an unused well on your property, but it has to be secured properly. It has to be carefully secured for your own safety, for your own liability, but also for the safety and health of our water supply in Fresno County. Okay, so that's pretty much a description of what needs to happen with a well. For further information, you can go to our website. You just put onto your your website, your search there, that you are searching for Fresno County Environmental Health, and it'll come up with the website there. And you can find out all kinds of information there, or you can also contact me. Phone number's right there, my email's right there. And you have any questions or concerns or anything like that, we are here to serve you and to help you. So I don't know if, Jarrett, you have any questions that you'd like me to address or anything else you'd like me to talk about?
Yeah, Thomas, thank you. That great presentation. Doesn't look like we have any questions at the moment, so I guess we'll give this one more second and see if anyone has any more questions they want to bring up. But if not, I think that will conclude our presentation.